If you're following along with the exercise files, in our previous movie, we talked about controlling the eye. I've gone through here and versioned out every clip where I added a node designed to control where our eyes are looking, and I've labeled that node. This way you have some ideas of some things you can do in order to control the eye. But notice, I didn't think every shot needed it, so I only applied it to those shots I thought would benefit from it. In this movie, we're going to do something a little bit different. Rather than working at the group post-clip level, I am going to try to create a look using visual effects. In other words, an Open Effects plugin. Specifically, I'm going to be using Sapphire Effects. As we spoke about in the chapter on Open Effects plugins, you can download a free version of Sapphire. It will be watermarked. You could probably email them and ask them for a 15-day non-watermarked version. You can probably get that from them. But if you want to follow along, you're going to need to download at least the watermarked version of this plugin. We're going to start by dropping into the edit page and duplicating our current timeline. And let's rename this 1403 VFX Look. Jump back into the color page. After duplicating it, we're going to have to refilter our timeline just to give us our hero shots, blue flagged hero shots. Let's come back to shot number 1. The reason I had you duplicate out the timeline, the effect I'm about to try, which is a lens flare effect, one setting doesn't translate from shot to shot to shot to shot. I really have to customize it on a per shot basis. So to create this look and then render it out, what I'm going to have to do is version out all of these shots, create a lens flare version, and then apply the lens flare on each shot and customize it for each shot. And this time, let's start on shot number 2. Again, another good shot that's relatively wide and will help us set up the overall look. I'm going to right click and create a new version and call it lens flare. Then I'm going to add a node at the end of the node tree. We'll open up our Open Effects panel, and I'm going to do a search for lens. Just to pull up the lens flare. There it is, my lens flare. There are two types, the auto track and the normal. For now, I'm just going to go with the normal lens flare. And if I needed to track a shot, I can always keyframe it, drag it over this last node, and apply the lens flare. And if I toggle this on and off, you can see already I kind of like overall what it's doing. I like the general brightness that a lens flare gives us. I'm not particularly a fan of this particular lens flare with that bright point source there, although it can be modified. I'm going to open up my Open Effects panel again, and let's come up to the load preset and look for a preset that might work a little bit better for us. And we've got a lot of different choices here, and as I scan through them, one choice I kind of like is the Cooke 20 to 100 millimeter zoom. And I know I've got this big bright spot here, but I've got an idea about that. So let me go ahead and load. So we've loaded up this preset. First thing I want to do is make this really large. The next thing I want to do is come down in this section here on hotspot. I'm going to bring down the brightness of the hotspot. There we go. That's better. So it's not quite so intense. And let's set the target of the lens flare here. Yeah, I kind of like it coming across there. If I Command D this on and off, that's not bad. I kind of like how that looks. It's kind of very interesting. So this is a very basic, just to kind of apply the lens flare. Let me show you something we do a little bit more compositing. I'll come up to shot 6 here. Again, we're going to do the lens flare. I'm going to right click on the node tree and zoom to window so that it zooms these out and tries to get all of the nodes here in the node tree. I'm going to Option S, and now we're going to again drag the lens flare onto node number 7. Let's try a slightly different preset. Let's look at Film Basic. Highlight that. That might work, so let's load that up. Yeah, and I kind of like the light coming from behind her. Once again, let's scroll down and drop off that hotspot. I don't need the hotspot. I want the rest of it. I'll probably just make this overall a little bit larger. There we go. Now, I do have this happening underneath a group. So let's see what happens if I just remove this from the group. And then I can always combine this with any of my other groups. Let's load up the Poppy group. And then let's load up the contrasty group. I think the lens flare works with all these different groups. I'm just going to go ahead and add this back to the power grade group, which is probably the most extreme of our looks. I'm going to adjust this a little bit, and let's take a look at any other parameters I might want to adjust here. And I might say, you know what, maybe it's a little bit heavy on her face. So what I could do is add a layer node, and here's what's happening. This node tree is getting a little out of control. I've got, coming off of node number 6, we're feeding nodes 7 and 9, and then recombining with the layer mixer. And then in node number 9, on top of the lens flare node, I'll go ahead, I'm going to put on a mask. I'll rotate it so it kind of matches the shape of her face. And then I'll make this nice and soft on the edge here. This way she kind of cuts through, and if I hide the wireframe, there we go. Now I've got her face cutting through here. I don't really like that pinpoint there, so I'm going to just come back into node number 7, open up the Open Effects panel, and now I'm going to open up the lens editor. I'm thinking that this is probably a source spike, so let me click on source spike B. Yep, that's what it is. It just popped up and brightened for me, so let me turn that off, and I'll turn off source spikes A. And that gets rid of most of what's going on there. If I hover over, looking to see if there's anything else I might want to get rid of. Maybe these source streaks here. Yeah, I'll get rid of those. Press OK. And so now I've gotten rid of that weird little spikes that were bothering me. And this is actually pretty cool. I like this, especially in conjunction with this kind of duotone look. All right, so this is good. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to go through here on my own, and when we get to the render chapter, I'm going to have this lens flare applied to all of these shots and then render out each of the different looks with the lens flare applied. And then that'll really open up the discussion with my client about what specifically they like, they don't like, and how they want this final music video to look.